We've been on a series now on faith, right? So last week we heard about baby faith. And so our pastor gave us an incredible message about baby faith and how we need to start at some point and we need to keep moving on that line of progression. And as we do, God continues to empower us and to build us up and to make us stronger and stronger in our faith. So this morning I'm taking this series into the next phase of things, and I'm going to be talking to you about obedient faith. And that may be kind of like, well, yeah, isn't that just like, like duh, obedient faith? But actually, I think as you listen to the message this morning, you'll hear what I'm exactly referring to and how it affects each and every one of us. And I think it'll hopefully minister to you in a powerful way if you'll just open up your hearts and your spirits. And as you're listening to this message this morning, I want you to, in particular, be thinking of your own situation and how this can apply to your own situation in your life. Because if you listen to it with that in mind, you'll get a lot out of the message and you'll walk out of here full and more enriched and more enlightened than you could otherwise if you just listened to it. I find myself, when I just listen to messages, I'll kind of put it into neutral at some point. About 15 minutes of the message, I can't even remember because I was daydreaming or I just wasn't engaged mentally like I need to be. But if you'll follow the message and if you'll be thinking about it in terms of your own life and how it impacts you, then it'll be a powerful thing to you, and ultimately it'll affect the people around you as you put it into practice in your own life. Amen? So, yeah, if you were in the Old Testament and you wanted to do like the most holy thing you could do, the thing that would be like the most righteous act of a person in the Old Testament, what you would do is you would take an animal, and on behalf of either yourself or your family, and you would take him going down to the temple, and you would sacrifice that animal unto the Lord. Now, if you didn't have an animal, that was fine, because you can go down to the temple, and in front of the temple, they're selling them. And they're selling little sheep, and they're selling chickens, and they're selling doves, and they're selling whatever the case may be. And you could buy one of those animals and take it in and sacrifice it on behalf of you or your family. So this was something that is completely foreign to us. I mean, can you imagine our day and age anything like that happening? I mean, the animal people would just go bananas, okay? It's bad enough that, they're up in arms just about, hamburgers that we eat. I mean, can you imagine what that would be like? So anyways, all that being what it is, that would be the most righteous thing you could do. So here comes Samuel. And he's speaking to King Saul. Here's the context. The King Saul was told specifically what he was supposed to do. He was supposed to go to war with this nation, and he was supposed to win the war, and then he was supposed to make sure that he didn't take anything back from that country. Because God didn't want anything from that sinful, reprobate country to infect his people. And, typically, they'll pick up, it's gold, and they'll take it home with him, and it's a statue of some god or something. He didn't want none of that. He said, don't touch any of it. Leave it all. Just do what I told you to do and come back. Well, Samuel, who's the prophet of the nation, now, and again, this is an odd thing for us too to understand because we don't have anything really to relate this to. But there was the king, and then there was Samuel. And Samuel represented God. And so Samuel was really, in the eyes of the people and everything else, he was actually higher than the king. He was the one who would appoint a king when a king was gone, which we saw when it happened with David. David, went to David's father, Nathan. Can't remember his father's name right now. Jesse, thank you. And had to line up his sons and then started looking through his sons to determine which would be the next king of Israel. So anyways. So Samuel was, he told Saul what the Lord told him to do, and Saul went out and defeated the nation that they were supposed to go to war with and came back. Saul did. Then Samuel then comes and visits the king, and when he's visiting the king, he hears sheep, doing their little baa thing, And he goes, is that the bleating of sheep that I hear? And right away, the king turned flush because these were sheep that had been taken from that people that he had just defeated. And he knew what he wasn't supposed to do. And so Samuel says to him this in this passage, okay? As the Lord has much delight in burnt offerings and sacrifices, much delight in burnt offerings and sacrifices, as in obeying the voice of the Lord. Behold, to obey is better than sacrifice. Wow. That would have been a profound thing to say to a king back in that day. To anyone, but to a king especially. To obey is better than sacrifice. Wow. And to heed, or to listen, than the fat of rams. For rebellion is as the sin of divination or witchcraft. So to rebel against God is a demonic thing. To fight against God is its roots. The roots of that spirit come from the demonic realm. And insubordination is an iniquity and idolatry. Because you have rejected the word of the Lord, he has also rejected you from being king. And so he lost his kingship because he disobeyed God. And such a little thing, but it's just a little thing, just a little thing. But it wasn't, not in God's sight. Remember, Moses was leading the people of Israel out of the wilderness and into the promised land. And then he struck the rock. After 40 years of obedience, 40 years of listening to all their complaining and all their shenanigans, 40 years of going up to the mountain and getting the 10 Commandments and coming down, break those 10 Commandments, going back up again, come back down with the 10 Commandments to his people. Then in the meantime, they've erected an idol and start worshiping the idol. On and on and on and on. He's been faithful to the last. And one moment of frustration, he took his rod and he struck this rock that water was to come out of, rather than tapping it. And because he struck that rock, he disobeyed God, because that's not what God told him to do. Now, there's another teaching in all that, because it's a lot of symbology. The rock represented something, and the staff represented something, and I can't get into all that and teach you all that right now. But just suffice it to say, it wasn't just the simple act of him hitting the staff with the rock with a staff. It was the depth of the disobedience that was involved. And because of that, he wasn't able to enter into the promised land. Because of that. Like all the good he did. Because of that, he wasn't able to enter in. Obedience is a powerful thing in God's kingdom. Now, we live in a dispensation, a time period of grace. And so grace covers, a multitude of sins, right? But then Paul said, but therefore, because grace covers a multitude of sins, should we sin? Should we then just go about sinning everywhere because there's grace to, he said, may it never be. Of course not. So just because there's grace that covers our sin, because Jesus Christ died on the cross, they didn't have that in the Old Testament. They didn't have Jesus Christ and his sacrifice. So because of that, they were having to do animal sacrifices to cover their sins. So here comes Jesus and dies for their sins, and there's no need for that anymore. We have the one ultimate lamb, the one ultimate sacrifice, if you will. And because of that, there's no need to go and, so that's why all sacrifices have been done away with. They don't do it, the Jewish people don't do it to this day. And that's an interesting question to get into one of them. If you ever want to get into an interesting question with a Jewish person, an Orthodox Jewish person, is ask them, if they don't believe Jesus Christ was the Messiah, then why aren't they still doing animal sacrifices? So anyways, I've done that before. There's a guy in Palm Springs out there every Thursday night. They shut down Highway 111, and they have like a night where there's just different vendors and things. And he has a little booth, and it says, come ask the rabbi. And I've gone over there before and spent about an hour and a half while my wife was looking everywhere for me and going back and forth with this guy. Anyways, so it's very interesting. But the point is, obedience in God's kingdom is a huge thing. I find that in the kingdom of God, it's really not a matter of a lack of information for most Christians. If it's a lack of information, if the reason why they're not succeeding in life and doing as good as they could is because they just don't know any better, like they're ignorant, they just don't know, well, then teaching would be the thing to do. I'll teach them, and once we teach them, then they'll be good. Well, no, because the presence of knowledge is not what changes a person. It's part of it. It's the beginning, it's the seed, But when you act upon the knowledge that you have, that's when transformation occurs. That's when something magical takes place in a person's life. And so just to have the knowledge, and so we have places that just teach, and that's great. They're kind of like, they're known as a teaching church. And that's wonderful. People need to be taught. But they also need to be inspired. People also need to know and be encouraged to be obedient to what it is they've heard. Because to just listen to all that stuff and not be obedient to it is to actually put a great responsibility on the listener. Because now you've told them. Now they know. They have no excuse not to do it other than their own lack of, following through with things. So in God's kingdom, obedience is huge. So when we talk about obedient faith this morning, we're talking not just about faith. We're talking about a faith that involves action. A faith that is grounded in answering God's call and being obedient to the things He's called us to do and tells us to do. And things that are in His Word, obviously. His written Word has got tons of information about all that He's asked us to do and told us to do and so forth. In fact, a lot of your prayers could be a lot more effective if you just read the Bible. I find that Christians end up praying about things that are already in the Bible. Like, I don't need to pray if I should murder someone, okay? I don't need to pray if I should forgive somebody who has aught against me. Like, Lord, do you really think, and just on and on and on and on and on. Ex-husband, whatever. I don't need to pray about that. That's already in the Bible. The Bible already tells me what to do. So if Christians would just stop spending so much time praying about things that are already in the Bible, and in many cases they already know, and start spending more time praying about Lord, tell me how to do this. Lord, give me the strength to go forgive this person. Lord, walk me through this, God, That would be something I think would be a lot more effective in our prayer lives than a lot of the way I hear Christians praying these days. By the way, we had an incredible prayer time. Right now we're meeting once a month and going and doing prayer walks. Pastor's been taking us on. But last week we went to, and we did a prayer walk there too, by the way. But we went to Stagecoach Park. And big group of us met there, and we went and prayed and so forth, had an incredible time. So look on your cards and find the next prayer time that we're going to be doing, and make sure you come out to it. You get a little bit of exercise and a whole lot of prayer, and it's a great way to start your morning. So obedient faith is a powerful thing. It's something that can actually change the game for us and take our lives from the course that it's on, good course, but not great course, and get us onto a sharp, pointed, focused course in the direction that God wants us to go in, doing exactly what God's called us to do. There's another terminology I'd like to introduce you to this morning. This morning you're going to hear a couple different definitions of words, okay, so get ready. But there's another concept I'd like to give you, and you're all aware of it, I'm sure, in one form or another. But it's called disruptive innovation. Another way people say it is disruptive technology. Okay, so either way. So disruptive technology doesn't necessarily have to be a brand new technology, something that's ever been discovered before, although sometimes it is. It can be something that is already known and that gets kind of reinvented in a new kind of fresh way. Maybe technologies become developed in such a way that old thing can be revived in a very new and fresh way that makes it way more effective than it used to be. For example, there were electric cars in 1918. And not just one. There were, 10, 12 different electric car companies back then. There was even a hybrid electric car that was produced. I think 2 or 3 of them by a couple different countries. And they're crazy that they did that technology with lead-acid batteries. In fact, if you listen to Jay Leno, some of you men may know that that's a guy, the guy that had the talk show in the evening, who's now retired. But he has a huge car collection. And his favorite car is this 1918 electric car thing he drives around. Anyways, I say all that to say, voila. The electric car dies out. Gas technology takes over almost exclusively. And then here we are all these years later, decades and decades later, and some guy named Elon Musk decides to go out and revive the technology and create an electric car. What a novel concept that's been around for 100 years. And all of a sudden, it's a disruptive technology, even though it's been around for ages. You ever ask yourself, where's BlackBerry? What happened to those? I had friends that were like, oh, no, I'll always use a BlackBerry. I'll never switch from BlackBerry. No, never. Where's Blockbuster Video right now? Anybody invest in Blockbuster Video stock? Where's Kodak? Gone. You know why? Disruptive technology. Innovative technology that was disruptive and actually knocked these companies that were multi-million-dollar companies right out of the park. Wasn't because of bad leadership, wasn't because of mismanagement, wasn't because they didn't have their game plan set in place and their marketing strategy going.